What if everything you've been told about death is wrong? Picture this moment for just a second. You're lying on what might be your final bed, surrounded by the familiar sounds of life slowly fading away. Your heart pounds with that ancient human fear we all carry deep within us. Who will be there when you cross over? What presence will greet you on the other side? But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. For centuries, we've been conditioned to expect angels, celestial beings in flowing robes, descending from heaven to guide us into the afterlife. But what if that's not what actually happens? Edgar Cayce, perhaps the most documented psychic in human history, shattered this belief during one of his most powerful trance sessions in the 1930s. His revelation was so startling, so contrary to everything families during the Great Depression had been taught, that it sent shockwaves through religious communities across America. Has this ever happened to you, discovering that something you believed your entire life was completely different from reality? The sleeping prophet, as Cayce was known, didn't just challenge our assumptions about death, he completely revolutionized them. In session after session, documented in the archives that still exist today, he consistently delivered the same earth-shattering message. The first presence you meet after death is not an angel. Instead, it's someone far more personal, far more meaningful to your individual journey. Stay with me until the end, because what Cayce discovered changes everything we think we know about crossing over. He revealed that departed souls are greeted by someone they love dearly who passed before them. Perhaps a mother whose embrace you've missed for decades, a father whose wisdom guided your earthly steps, or a child whose laughter once filled your home. Sometimes it's a trusted spiritual guide who has walked alongside your soul, not just for years, but across lifetimes, centuries, even millennia. What you're about to discover might surprise you, but in the rarest and most exalted encounters, Cayce described souls being met by the radiant presence of Christ himself. Not the distant, judgmental figure so often portrayed in traditional religion, but a being of pure love whose very presence dissolves every fear, every doubt, every moment of terror. About the unknown. This wasn't symbolic language or poetic metaphor. Cayce insisted this was the reality experienced again and again by countless souls passing through the veil between worlds. Think about the profound implications of this revelation. If the first spirit to greet you isn't some assigned celestial messenger, but someone whose love transcends the boundaries of life and death, then everything changes. Death is no longer a lonely rupture into the unknown. It becomes a reunion. The question that haunted Cayce's listeners during those desperate depression years, and the same question that might be stirring in your mind right now, is this: when your moment comes, who will be standing there waiting for you? But there's something even more remarkable about Cayce's revelation, something that connects directly to how you're living your life right at this very moment. If revelations like these resonate with something deep inside you, subscribe to this channel, because we're just scratching the surface of what Edgar Cayce discovered about consciousness, death, and the eternal journey of the soul. There's so much more waiting to be explored together. This hidden truth about death reveals something extraordinary about the fabric of existence itself. During those groundbreaking readings in the early 1930s, when families gathered around Cayce's unconscious form in that small Virginia Beach room, something unprecedented was being documented for the first time in human history. He described how newly released souls don't stumble blindly into an unknown realm, but are immediately surrounded by familiar vibrations, voices, faces, and energies they already recognize on the deepest level. Imagine the transformation this understanding brings to grief itself. That aching loss you feel when someone beloved passes isn't the end of connection. It's actually preparation for reunion. The mother whose lullabies shaped your childhood dreams, the father whose steady, presence anchored your turbulent teenage years, the sibling who shared your secrets and your laughter. They don't simply vanish into cosmic void. Instead, they become part of a welcoming committee that exists beyond the physical realm, their love creating a bridge between worlds. But here's where Cayce's revelations become even more mind-bending. For some individuals, the first presence isn't a family member at all, but what he called a soul teacher, a guide who has walked alongside them, not just through this current lifetime, but across centuries, maybe even millennia. These aren't random spiritual assignments handed down from some celestial bureaucracy. These are relationships forged in the deepest chambers of consciousness, bonds that transcend individual incarnations and speak to the eternal nature of spiritual mentorship. Think about those moments in your life when you felt inexplicably drawn to certain people, when you've met someone and immediately sensed a connection that defies logical explanation. What if those aren't coincidences? What if they're echoes of these ancient soul contracts, glimpses of relationships that span far beyond our current understanding of time and identity? Now, I want to go even deeper into this revelation because Cayce described something that challenges every conventional religious framework. In the rarest and most exalted encounters, some souls don't meet family members or guides first. They immediately perceive a blinding light, what he called the Christ consciousness. This isn't the bearded figure from Sunday school paintings or the distant deity of theological debates. This is pure, undiluted love, manifesting as radiant presence that embraces the departing soul directly. Cayce was emphatic about this point. These weren't symbolic metaphors or poetic interpretations designed to comfort the grieving. These were actual realities experienced by countless souls making the transition. The documentation is all there. Session after session, reading after reading, a consistent pattern emerging that suggests our entire understanding of what happens at death needs a complete overhaul. The impact of this revelation extends far beyond comfort for the bereaved. It fundamentally reshapes how we understand the journey of consciousness itself, revealing that death isn't an ending, but a continuation of relationships and connections that operate on frequencies we're only beginning to comprehend. Write in the comments. This changes everything if you're starting to see death in a completely different light. The moment this truth sinks in, it transforms everything about how we approach our final transition. Death isn't the terrifying leap into darkness that haunts our nightmares. It's actually a homecoming, a return to connections that were never truly severed. When you realize that the first spirit to greet you is someone whose love transcends physical boundaries rather than some distant celestial stranger, the entire experience shifts from abandonment to embrace. But Cayce revealed something even more profound about those final moments that completely changes our understanding of the dying process. During the actual separation from the body, when consciousness begins its transition between realms, departing souls retain an incredible awareness of what's happening around them. They can still hear family members crying, still sense the grief and love pouring out from those gathered at their bedside. This isn't some cruel cosmic joke designed to increase suffering. It's actually part of a beautiful orchestration, because at the same moment that departing souls are experiencing the raw emotion of their loved one's grief, they're also feeling something else entirely, the warmth of those who have come to escort them home. Imagine that duality for a moment. On one side, the familiar voices of family members saying goodbye, their tears and whispered words of love still reaching across the veil. On the other side, the welcoming presence of those who crossed before, their energy radiating comfort and recognition. This revelation completely dismantles one of humanity's deepest fears. That terrible thought that keeps people awake at night, wondering if they'll die alone in some sterile hospital room with no one who truly knows them nearby. Cayce's message cuts through that terror like light through darkness with one simple, powerful truth. No one crosses alone. Always there is a reception. Always there is guidance. This isn't wishful thinking or comforting fiction designed to ease our anxiety about mortality. This is a universal principle that operates regardless of circumstances, regardless of how death occurs, regardless of whether you're surrounded by dozens of loving family members or taking your final breath in complete physical solitude. The reception committee exists beyond physical presence, operating on frequencies that connect soul to soul rather than body to body. The transformation this understanding brings to our entire mindset about death is staggering. When you know with absolute certainty that crossing over means stepping into a gathering rather than into emptiness, when you understand that familiar voices and loving energies are already waiting on the other side, the journey becomes less about ending and more about beginning. But there's an even deeper layer to this revelation that speaks to how these spiritual laws actually operate in practice, something that reveals the incredible precision behind what might seem like cosmic coincidence. Write in the comments, "I'm not alone," if this truth is shifting how you see your own journey. The precision behind these encounters becomes even more remarkable when you understand how radically Cayce's revelations challenged the religious establishment of his time. Here was a man whose readings were directly contradicting centuries of church doctrine that insisted only angels could act as spiritual escorts. The traditional framework painted afterlife encounters as formal, hierarchical procedures managed by celestial bureaucracy. But Cayce's documented sessions, now preserved in the ARE archives, revealed something far richer and more relational, a deeply personal universe where love, not religious protocol, determines who greets you. For those who feel called to dive deeper into these spiritual mysteries that most people never encounter, hit that subscribe button. This channel is dedicated to uncovering the profound truths that can transform how you see life, death, and everything in between. This wasn't just a minor theological adjustment. This was a complete transformation of how we understand consciousness itself. The hidden truth Cayce uncovered reveals that the afterlife isn't entry into some strange foreign territory where everything familiar gets left behind. Instead, it's a continuation of consciousness, a seamless extension of the relationships and spiritual contracts that shaped your earthly journey. Death doesn't erase the bonds of love or dissolve the agreements your soul made before birth. It actually amplifies them, bringing them into clearer focus. Think about the profound impact this understanding has on every decision you make, every relationship you nurture, every moment of connection you experience. If consciousness continues and relationships intensify rather than disappear, then nothing you've built with genuine love ever truly ends. The investment you make in authentic connection isn't just enriching your current life. It's literally constructing the framework for your afterlife experience. But here's where Cayce's revelations become deeply personal for anyone who's ever lost someone they loved. Those dreams where you see a departed spouse smiling at you with peaceful eyes. Those moments when you swear you felt a deceased parent's hand gently touch your shoulder. Those sudden sensations of presence when you're missing someone terribly. According to Cayce, these aren't wishful thinking or grief-induced hallucinations. These are actual encounters with the same spiritual forces that will meet you when your time comes. The mindset shift this creates is staggering. Every impression, every dream, every subtle sense of continued presence from someone who has crossed over becomes a preview of your own future experience. These aren't illusions designed to comfort the grieving mind. They're glimpses of the reunion that awaits, evidence of relationships that transcend physical existence and continue operating on frequencies most people never learn to recognize. Now, I want to reveal something even more profound about how these spiritual connections actually determine who has the ability to reach you at the moment of transition, because the mechanism behind these encounters follows laws that will completely change how you see your life choices. Write in the comments. The connection continues. If you've ever felt the presence of someone who passed away, the mechanism behind these spiritual encounters operates on a principle so elegant, so precise, that it reveals the hidden architecture of consciousness itself. What you encounter at the moment of death isn't random or assigned by some cosmic lottery system. It directly mirrors your own soul's vibration. If your journey through life has been marked by genuine kindness, compassion, and authentic love for others, then the greeting spirit who comes for you will reflect that same energy, that same warmth, instantly dissolving any fear or confusion about what's happening. This isn't about religious performance or checking boxes on some spiritual scorecard. This is about the actual frequency your consciousness resonates with, the energy signature you've been building through countless daily decisions, small acts of kindness, moments of forgiveness, choices to help rather than harm. Every single interaction shapes this vibration, creating the magnetic field that determines who has the ability to reach you when your time comes. The universe operates by spiritual laws as precise as any physical principle, and the fundamental rule governing afterlife encounters is beautifully simple, like attracts like. The first spirit who comes is the one whose energy can meet yours without conflict, without discord, without creating additional confusion during an already profound transformation. This reveals something extraordinary. Your afterlife experience is literally being shaped right now, in this moment, through every choice you make, every relationship you nurture, every decision to respond with love instead of fear. But even in the most traumatic circumstances, this law of spiritual resonance continues to operate with incredible precision. During World War II, when desperate mothers wrote to Cayce asking if their sons had died alone on distant battlefields, his response never wavered. Even soldiers dying violently, suddenly, in the chaos of combat, were immediately met by familiar guides. Sometimes it was a fallen comrade who had crossed over earlier in the same battle. Sometimes it was family members whose love transcended physical distance. But always there were figures of comforting light waiting to ease the transition. The impact of this revelation extends far beyond comfort for grieving families. It demonstrates that no external circumstance, no matter how violent or sudden, can override these spiritual laws. The connection operates on frequencies that transcend physical conditions, reaching through explosions and chaos to deliver the same personal reception that awaits someone peacefully passing in their sleep. Now, I want to explore something even more profound about how this principle transforms not just death, but how we understand the entire purpose of human existence and the choices we make every single day. Write in the comments, "My choices matter," if you're realizing how your daily decisions are shaping your spiritual frequency. This understanding transforms the entire landscape of human existence when you realize that every moment of genuine connection you create is literally building the reception committee for your own transition. The documented sessions from Cayce's readings reveal death not as the void we've been conditioned to fear, but as a gathering, a welcome filled with presence rather than emptiness. Think about the profound shift this creates in your mindset. That moment which has terrified humanity since consciousness first awakened isn't an ending at all, but a continuation of relationships too deep, too fundamental for any grave to break. The beauty of this revelation is matched only by its precision. Even when souls become confused during the transition, unwilling to release their earthly attachments and unable to recognize the help being extended to them, the system doesn't abandon them. In those moments when consciousness lingers, clinging to familiar patterns that no longer serve, Christ consciousness becomes the gentle anchor, pulling them toward light and healing. This isn't about judgment or punishment. It's about love so profound that no soul gets left behind, even when they resist their own liberation. Cayce described this entire process using a metaphor that completely reframes how we understand both death and birth. Just as a newborn must adjust to the shock of physical life, often crying and confused, until parental guidance helps them orient to their new reality. Departed souls experience a similar adjustment period as they orient to spiritual life. The difference is that instead of earthly parents, they have spiritual guides whose love transcends anything we experience in physical form. This orientation process reveals the hidden architecture behind existence itself. Birth and death aren't opposites, they're parallel transitions, both requiring adjustment, both providing guidance, both representing movement from one state of consciousness to another. The same pattern of care, continuity, and love that supports a child entering physical life operates when a soul enters spiritual life. But there's something even more remarkable about how this process unfolds. Something that reveals why Cayce insisted his message was revolutionary rather than merely comforting. The mechanism that determines who can serve as your guide operates according to spiritual laws that challenge everything. Mainstream religion has taught about angels and divine intervention. Now I want to reveal the profound truth about why Cayce emphasized that your first greeter is specifically not an angel, because understanding this distinction unlocks secrets about the nature of spiritual relationships that will completely transform how you see every connection in your life. Write in the comments, birth and death are connected. If this parallel between transitions is opening your mind to a new understanding. The phrase, not an angel, becomes crucial when you understand that Cayce wasn't denying the existence of celestial beings or dismissing their importance in the spiritual hierarchy. Instead, he was correcting a limited view that had dominated religious thinking for centuries. Angels absolutely play roles in the cosmic order, but here's the hidden truth that transforms everything. Sometimes what your departing soul needs most isn't a magnificent celestial messenger with wings and flowing robes, but something far more intimate. Your mother's familiar smile, your father's steady hand, or the laughter of a child who crossed before you. This revelation unveils the profound architecture of how spiritual guidance actually operates. The afterlife isn't governed by unfamiliar beings following cosmic protocols or celestial bureaucracy managing souls like case files. Instead, it operates through the same network of love and responsibility that governed your earthly life. Amplified and purified, you're welcomed home by souls who actually know you, who love you not because they're assigned to, but because genuine connection transcends physical death and continues operating on frequencies that most people never learn to recognize. The impact of this truth became devastatingly clear during one of Cayce's most documented cases from the Great Depression. A family, shattered by the sudden death of their young daughter, came to him through tears, asking the question that haunts every parent's nightmare. Was she alone when she died? What Cayce revealed under trance lifted a crushing weight from their hearts that had been destroying them. Their little girl was immediately received by her grandmother, someone who had loved her deeply during her brief earthly life. The child felt no fear, no confusion, no isolation. Instead, she experienced pure joy and instant recognition. This wasn't some comforting fiction designed to ease parental grief. This was documented reality, preserved in the ARE archives, demonstrating how spiritual laws operate with precision, even in the most heartbreaking circumstances. The transformation this brought to that family's understanding of death rippled outward, reshaping how entire communities approached loss and mortality. When word spread about Cayce's revelation, people began seeing death not as a terrifying separation, but as a doorway into familiar embrace. The beauty of this system lies in its perfect logic. Love is the bridge, and bonds forged in authentic connection cannot be severed by something as temporary as the loss of physical form. But there's an even deeper layer to this truth that reveals how these spiritual connections operate across time itself. Write in the comments, "Love transcends death," if this story about the little girl and her grandmother is touching something deep in your heart. Cayce's crystal-clear descriptions about real family connections continuing beyond the grave, rather than vague promises of angelic encounters, fundamentally reshaped how Americans understood death and provided comfort that went far deeper than traditional religious consolation. This wasn't abstract theology or wishful thinking. This was documented reality with names, faces, and specific relationships that survived physical separation. The transformation this brought to grieving families created ripple effects that spread quietly through communities across the country. People began experiencing a profound mindset shift, no longer seeing death as life's final period, but as the opening of doors to familiar embraces. The hidden truth that love operates as an actual bridge between worlds, with genuine bonds remaining completely unbroken by something as temporary as bodily loss, gave families permission to feel connection rather than just loss. This wasn't denial or false hope. This was recognition of spiritual laws that operate with precision, regardless of human understanding. But perhaps the most beautiful revelation came through Cayce's description of what those first moments after death actually feel like from the inside. He compared the experience to entering a room filled with music, complex, layered, with harmonies and frequencies you don't immediately comprehend, but within that symphony, you recognize familiar melodies. These melodies are the presences of those who come for you, their spiritual signatures creating sounds your soul has been listening for across lifetimes. The impact of this metaphor is staggering when you really absorb what it means. You're not walking into silence or chaos, you're stepping into a symphony where every note represents love, connection, and welcome. Some of the music is new, complex, part of frequencies you're only beginning to understand, but the melodies that matter most, the ones that guide you through the initial confusion, are songs you've been hearing your entire life. The lullaby your mother hummed, the steady rhythm of your father's heartbeat, the joyful chaos of children's laughter. All of it continues, all of it welcomes, all of it guides you home. This transforms how we understand not just death, but consciousness itself. If departing souls recognize spiritual melodies from familiar presences, then every relationship you've built, every moment of authentic connection you've shared, is literally composing the soundtrack for your own homecoming. Now, I want to reveal something even more profound about how these spiritual melodies actually determine the quality and nature of your afterlife experience, because the frequency you resonate with shapes everything that follows. Write in the comments, "I hear the melody," if this music metaphor is helping you understand how spiritual connections actually work. The frequency you resonate with becomes the key that unlocks specific spiritual doorways, and this truth resonated with devastating power during the Great Depression, when families were losing everything they thought mattered. In those desperate years, when financial security, homes, and hope itself seemed to evaporate, Cayce's message offered something that economic collapse couldn't touch: the knowledge that even in humanity's darkest moments of despair and suffering, the spiritual world remained intimate, close, and personally connected to each individual life. This wasn't distant comfort from an unreachable God or abstract promises about heavenly rewards. This was immediate, personal, relational connection that operated independently of external circumstances. Families who had lost their farms, their businesses, their entire material foundation could still know with certainty that the bonds they'd built with love transcended economic disaster. The transformation this brought to their mindset during those brutal years kept hope alive when everything else was crumbling. But here's where Cayce's revelation becomes revolutionary in its implications for how we live right. Now, if the greeting spirit who comes for you reflects the love and consciousness you've cultivated during your earthly journey, then every single choice you make, every decision to forgive instead of harbor resentment, every moment you choose compassion over judgment, every act of genuine kindness becomes active preparation for that encounter. The universe itself is revealed as fundamentally relational, where nothing happens in isolation and every interaction shapes the spiritual frequency that determines your afterlife experience. The impact of this understanding created a seismic shift away from the cold doctrines that had dominated religious thinking for centuries. Instead of afterlife as distant judgment halls where unknown beings evaluate your worthiness, Cayce described continuation of relationship, community, and care. This wasn't about escaping punishment or earning rewards. This was about stepping into amplified versions of the connections you'd already built. The Cayce encourage this gave people to face both life and death with less fear, transformed entire communities. Now, I want to explore the profound responsibility this places on every moment of your current existence. Because understanding how your daily choices are literally constructing your spiritual reception committee changes everything about how you approach relationships and personal growth. Write in the comments, every choice matters, if you're realizing how your daily decisions are shaping your spiritual future. The responsibility this places on your current choices becomes even more profound when you understand how the vibrational state you carry at the moment of death directly influences who has the ability to reach you. This isn't about moral scorekeeping or divine punishment. It's about spiritual physics operating with the same precision as any natural law. Those who live destructively, who built their consciousness around selfishness, cruelty, or willful ignorance of others, suffering may find themselves greeted not by familiar loving faces, but by unfamiliar guides whose specific task is reorienting them toward light and healing. This isn't correction through punishment, but correction through education, a necessary process ensuring that no soul remains lost or trapped in destructive patterns. The beauty of this system lies in its perfect balance: justice without cruelty, accountability without abandonment. Even souls who spent lifetimes causing harm receive a guidance, though their guides may feel distant or challenging, until inner transformation begins. Cayce's message masterfully combined hope with responsibility in a way that challenged listeners to take ownership of their spiritual development. You're never alone. That promise remains absolute and unchanging. But who comes to meet you reflects exactly what you've prepared yourself to receive through decades of daily decisions, moment-by-moment choices, and the consciousness you've cultivated. Through genuine relationships or selfish isolation. During World War II, when global conflict pushed human suffering to unprecedented levels, this teaching carried urgent relevance. Thousands of American families, desperate for reassurance about sons and husbands dying violent deaths on distant battlefields, wrote to Cayce with the same haunting question: did he die alone? The consistency of Cayce's response during those dark years provided comfort that sustained entire communities through the darkest hours. No soul crosses alone, not the soldier falling in Normandy, not the sailor drowning in the Pacific, not the airman shot down over enemy territory. The transformation this understanding brought to wartime grief was remarkable. Instead of imagining their loved ones dying in terror and isolation, families could envision immediate welcome by familiar guides. sometimes fallen comrades, sometimes family members, always figures of light whose presence dissolved fear and carried souls safely home. Now, I want to reveal something even more profound about how these spiritual laws operate during times of global crisis, because what Cayce discovered about collective trauma and spiritual guidance changes everything we understand about human connection across the veil. Write in the comments, "No one is forgotten." If you're feeling the comfort of knowing that even in humanity's darkest moments, spiritual guidance remains constant. The mechanism behind these spirituals encounters operates through recognition, which becomes the master key unlocking smooth afterlife transitions. The departing soul isn't randomly assigned to unfamiliar guides or thrust into chaotic spiritual bureaucracy. Instead, consciousness is drawn first to what it already knows, what it loves, and what vibrates at frequencies it can immediately recognize and trust. This process mirrors how a child waking from a nightmare doesn't need to see their parent to feel secure. Just hearing that familiar voice dissolves fear instantly. Recognition creates the bridge between worlds, allowing consciousness to move from physical to spiritual existence without the terror of complete unfamiliarity. Your mother's energy signature, your father's steady presence, your siblings' laughter, these become anchors of familiarity in an experience that might otherwise overwhelm newly departing souls with its magnitude and complexity. But there's a deeper layer to this process that reveals the ultimate architecture of spiritual existence. While family members or soul guides may provide that crucial first greeting, every soul must eventually face something far more profound: the Christ consciousness. This isn't the distant, judgmental figure that traditional religion often portrays. This is pure illumination, divine love manifested as understanding rather than condemnation, helping souls comprehend their choices, their growth, and their direction with perfect clarity. The transformation this encounter brings isn't about punishment or reward, it's about truth. Christ consciousness operates as what Cayce called the great mirror of truth, where every soul finally sees itself without the filters of ego, fear, or self-deception that clouded earthly perception. That familiar hand of your grandmother, or the comforting presence of a departed friend, may guide you through the initial transition. But beyond that loving welcome lies something infinitely greater: the light of Christ, that illuminates not just who you were, but who you truly are and who you're becoming. This revelation challenges everything we've been taught about Judgment Day or divine evaluation. There's no angry deity with scorecards, no heavenly tribunal determining worthiness. Instead, there's perfect love creating perfect understanding, allowing each soul to see its journey with the same compassion and wisdom that guided its creation. Now I want to explore how this encounter with Christ consciousness actually transforms the soul's understanding of its entire existence, because what happens in that moment of perfect clarity reshapes everything about spiritual growth and eternal purpose. Write in the comments, "Perfect understanding awaits," if you're realizing that divine judgment is actually divine illumination. The encounter with Christ consciousness transforms everything about how souls understand their journey. But there's something equally profound about how this revelation reshaped an entire generation's relationship with death and meaning. For post-war America, dealing with unprecedented loss and trauma from global conflict, Cayce's teachings provided a completely new spiritual foundation. Returning soldiers who had watched friends die in their arms, families who had buried sons and husbands, entire communities scarred by violence, all of them began understanding death not as final separation, but as passage into wider relationship networks that transcended physical existence. This mindset transformation was revolutionary because it gave people permission to maintain connection rather than just process grief. The hidden truth that consciousness continues in expanded form, rather than simply ending or moving to some distant heavenly realm, provided framework for healing that traditional religion couldn't offer. These weren't abstract theological concepts, but practical spiritual laws that operated with precision, regardless of circumstances. But the mechanism behind these encounters reveals something even more profound about personal responsibility and spiritual development. Every thought you think, every action you take, every intention you hold, all of it builds frequency that shapes your soul's experience. At the moment of death, you don't suddenly become someone different. You carry that exact vibrational signature with you, and the first spirit who comes is the one whose frequency aligns perfectly with yours, whether that energy is pure, loving and clear, or troubled, confused and weighted down with unresolved patterns. The impact of this understanding extends far beyond comfort about death. It reveals how every moment of your current existence is literally constructing your spiritual future. But there's an even deeper layer that challenges everything we think we know about individual identity and the scope of relationships that shape us. Sometimes the first greeting spirit doesn't come from your current lifetime at all, but from past incarnations, soul companions or guides who have walked alongside your consciousness across centuries, maybe millennia. These aren't random spiritual encounters, but reunions that continue soul contracts stretching far beyond any single earthly existence, revealing the true scope of relationships that influence your eternal development. Now, I want to explore how these ancient soul connections actually determine your life's purpose and challenges long before you're even born into physical form, because understanding this changes everything about why certain people appear in your life at exactly the right moments. Write in the comments, "My connections span lifetimes," if you're starting to recognize patterns in your relationships that might extend beyond this current existence. These ancient soul connections reveal something profound about the true nature of existence, that each earthly life is actually a lesson, with death serving as the review point where everything gets examined, understood, and integrated. The first spirit who greets you doesn't just offer comfort or companionship. They act like a spiritual teacher receiving your completed exam, gently reminding you of where you've been, what you've learned, and what still needs development as you prepare for whatever comes next in your eternal journey. This transforms death from a terrifying unknown into a structured, purposeful, deeply personal process that operates with precision rather than chaos. By the 1950s, as Cayce's documented readings were being studied more widely, seekers began noticing consistent patterns that emerged regardless of whether the departing soul was a child, a soldier, a farmer, or a scholar. The mechanism remained the same: recognition, reunion, guidance, and ultimately encounter with divine truth that illuminated every choice and revealed every opportunity for continued growth. The impact of this revelation addresses humanity's most primal terror, the fear of dying alone, abandoned, forgotten. Cayce's central message dismantled this fear by demonstrating that love isn't erased by physical death, but actually becomes the very infrastructure that carries souls safely home. The bonds you build through genuine connection, authentic care, and selfless love don't disappear when the body fails. They transform into bridges, pathways, and welcoming committees that ensure no soul ever crosses into the unknown without familiar guidance. But here's where this teaching becomes revolutionary for how you live right now, today, in this moment. Understanding that your afterlife experience begins with recognition and reunion completely transforms your approach to relationships, choices, and daily interactions. Every act of genuine kindness you offer, every decision to forgive instead of harbor resentment, every moment you choose compassion over judgment, all of it becomes active construction work, building the bridges that will carry you home when you're time comes. Death isn't something that happens to you. It's something you prepare for through decades of choices that either strengthen or weaken the connections that will meet you on the other side. This shifts the entire focus from fearing the end to investing in eternal relationships that make death anticipation rather than terror. Now, I want to reveal the most profound implication of everything Cayce discovered, because understanding how these spiritual laws apply to your current relationships will change everything about how you see the people in your life and why they appeared exactly when they did. Write in the comments, "I'm building bridges now," if you're realizing how your current choices are shaping your eternal connections. The most profound implication of everything Cayce revealed reaches far beyond death itself. It illuminates the hidden purpose behind every relationship in your current life. Those people who appeared at exactly the right moment when you needed guidance most. The connections that felt inexplicably familiar from the first meeting, the relationships that challenged you to grow in ways you never expected. None of these are accidents. They're part of an intricate spiritual network that's been guiding your development across lifetimes, preparing you for encounters that will continue long after this physical existence ends. Understanding this changes everything about how you approach each day, each conversation, each opportunity to show kindness or offer forgiveness. You're not just living a single isolated life. You're participating in an eternal dance of consciousness, building bridges that will carry not only you, but others safely across the threshold when the time comes. If you've stayed with me through this entire journey, exploring these profound truths that Edgar Cayce preserved for us, then you understand something most people never realize: that death isn't the enemy we've been taught to fear, but the doorway to deeper connection, greater understanding, and reunion with love that transcends every boundary we thought was permanent. The fact that you've listened to this message, absorbed these revelations, and allowed them to shift your perspective means you're already preparing for that ultimate encounter in ways that will transform not just your crossing, but the crossings of everyone whose life you touch. This connection we've built through exploring these truths together that matters more than you might realize. If this resonates with your heart, hit that like button, because you've helped create something meaningful here. And if you made it all the way to the end, leave a comment saying, "This message was meant for me." I'd love to know who else is discovering these life-changing truths alongside you. For those ready to dive deeper into these spiritual mysteries, subscribe to this channel, because there are so many more revelations waiting to be explored, more hidden truths that will continue reshaping how you understand existence itself. There's a video right here that complements this topic perfectly, revealing even more about what Cayce discovered regarding the soul's journey. Click and continue with me over there, because this is just the beginning of understanding how profound spiritual laws actually govern every aspect of our eternal existence.